And good morning. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to class. It is Dr. Roddenberry streaming to you from upstate New York, Chautauqua, New York. It's sort of a rainy, cloudy day. I'm here in the attic of this house here in the Chautauqua Institution, streaming to you live from Western North Carolina. Hello, it looks like we have a couple of people in the audience. If you're here today, go ahead and check in and say hello. I did want to let you know, if you're a friend of Taria's, you know, the pregnant lady who's been in our class this past week, she is actually, I think, maybe today is the big day. I think they're going to induce her, so we might have a new family, a new part of the Psychology 118 family today. So I'm really thinking about Taria. Taria, if you do get a chance to watch this broadcast recorded later, just know that we're all thinking about you and sending you good wishes. She actually swears that if she's gives birth earlier today, she says she's coming to the webinar tonight. I think that's crazy, but she'll do it if she can. Good morning, Johanna. Good to see you as always. And Dimitro, good to see you as well. Thanks for checking in today here on a fine Wednesday morning. Let's go ahead and get started. Inset. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 11, Gender and Behavior. And today we're going to talk specifically about some differences between males and females. Is the difference between males and females mostly cultural, or are there some biological differences in the ways we behave, think, and our brains are organized between males and females? That's sort of the point of today's lecture. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and get started if we can. So, how are males and females different, other than our primary and secondary sex characteristics? Do the differences between males and females extend beyond these primary and secondary sexual characteristics? We're going to talk about that a little bit today. Now, a lot of this research is going to come from this research technique called a meta-analysis. And what a meta-analysis does is it compares the effects found in multiple research studies, and it kind of puts all the data together from multiple research studies to see if there are trends that carry across different research studies. And it allows you to estimate the size and consistency of an effect. So this one person in a library, in a research lab in Buffalo, may do a research study looking at the difference between males and females, and then somebody in Arizona does a study looking at the difference between males and females, and then somebody in Tokyo may do a study, and each one of these persons conducts one research study. What a meta-analysis does is it collects all these research studies together, and it sort of allows us to see how consistently this effect is found in different research studies and how strong this effect is across lots of different research studies. And what meta-analysis of sex differences in cognitive functioning show that there are no big gender differences in overall intelligence between males and females. Okay, our brains work pretty much similarly. However, there are some differences in very specific cognitive abilities. The largest gender difference that you're going to find in cognitive abilities is in spatial orientation abilities. Your ability to perceive and mentally rotate objects in your mind. So, look at these objects right down here. Is there any way you can rotate these objects? Are these the same exact object? Can you rotate these to be where they're the same exact image? can you rotate these objects and make them look similar? You know what? When you rotate these objects, you'll notice that they are, in fact, not similar, right? Now, your ability to rotate these objects in your mind and compare the rotated objects, there you go, good job, Dimitro, he's a guy, is an intellectual ability that we all have. It's the same ability that allows you to use maps and to find your way using directions and whatnot. And what you're going to find is that this is where we see the largest difference between males and females. And it turns out that males tend to be better with spatial orientation abilities than female. And Dimitro's going ahead and showing off his male prowess by telling us that these two objects are not the same. Right? And so what you're going to see is that males consistently outperform females in the ability to perform mental rotation of a figure in 3 dimensions. This is a part of an IQ test. One of the things that an IQ test will ask you to do is to engage in these mental rotation exercises. Now, while the overall scores of males and females are actually going to be similar, what you're going to find is that in this one part of the IQ test, your males consistently outperform your females. Okay? Now, what other gender differences can we look at? Verbal abilities. Verbal ability is your ability to use and respond to language. And I would say that in terms of verbal abilities, females get the nod. They're a little bit better in verbal abilities. What you're going to see is that little girls start speaking sooner than little boys. Little girls have larger vocabularies. Little girls are going to have better reading scores than little boys. And boys are more likely to stutter and be dyslexic, to have language problems compared to little girls. In fact, one of the important things that you need to do as a parent is to decide whether or not you need to start your kid in kindergarten early or not. Based on your kid's age, some of you are going to have the opportunity where you're going to say, gee, should I put my really young boy into kindergarten, or should I hold him back for one more year? And what you're going to find is that little boys who are really young, who are placed into kindergarten younger, are going to struggle more than females who are placed into kindergarten at a younger age. And it's because of these verbal abilities that the little boys don't possess. So what you're going to see is, although your boys are better at mental rotation, your females are going to be slightly better when it comes to language abilities. They're going to talk first. They're going to have better vocabularies. They're going to start reading first. And this is going to lead to more success in kindergarten and first grade. Right? Now, the old belief was that males are better than females at math. That's an old cultural belief that we have that still persists, even though it's not really true. Meta-analysis have showed that there are no longer gender differences in general math performance or achievement. I say general because, like I said, some of your specific abilities may show a little tendency towards your males, but as a general rule, these findings, these math differences that we used to find, no longer exist. It's believed that acculturation and gender beliefs about cultural beliefs about gender affected this difference. So boys were more encouraged to engage in math, were pushed harder at math, and these led to increased differences in math scores. And so, but it was believed that these differences occurred not because the brains are organized differently, but because of cultural factors that encourage boys to engage in mathematical processes. Now, so good morning, Matt. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming in. I'm doing well. Ivelisse, sorry, I saw you came in and said hello. Nice to see you as well. Now, there are some exceptions to the findings. Now, typically, boys have a better attitude towards math. Again, this is probably culture. We're told, hey, boys are good at math, females are not. So boys are going to tend to have a more positive attitude towards math. Now, in high school, your boys are going to start to outperform girls in complex math problem solving, and you're going to see males outperform females at the high end of the distribution. So, what we're going to see is that your boys are going to do better in the advanced math classes in high school, and when it comes to the SAT scores in the really high range, what you're going to see is that more boys score really high on the SAT math portion than do females. So if you look at these numbers right here, these are the number of males for each female in the top part of standardized test scoring. So what you're going to see is that it's way more likely to boys demonstrate themselves as gifted mathematically than it is for females. In the early 80s, when I grew up, boys were 13 times more likely to be in the extremely high range of mathematical performance compared to females. So while the averages might have been the same, what you were going to see was way more high-performing boys than females. Now, here we are in 2006, 2010, the last time we had data. What you're going to see is that there's still 4 times as many boys in the really high ranges of the math SAT than the females. Now, since this pattern emerges late, research has suggested it might be due to differences in socialization. Boys are going to take more math classes because we're going to be encouraged to do that. Our teachers are going to spend more time trying to make sure we get it because they think we should. And so there are lots of what we believe cultural forces that push boys to extend their math ability, which is demonstrated in math achievement that occurs later in the adolescent years, right? So, gender differences. Okay, so gender comparisons in cognition. The boys are specifically and clearly going to have better spatial abilities, better abilities at manipulating objects and shapes in their mind. Females are going to demonstrate better verbal ability. They're going to start speaking sooner, have better language skills, and be more prepared for kindergarten than our boys. And then you will see math differences begin to occur that favor boys as we move into adolescence in the later years of formal schooling, right? Now, here's the upshot. What I want you to know is the strongest gender finding that we have in cognitive abilities is for spatial orientation, showing boys are better at rotating things in their mind. Verbal abilities go to females, but it's not as strong. Mathematical ability differences in general math abilities do emerge, but they are not as strong. The biggest difference between male and female minds is this ability to rotate objects in the head. All the other findings are quite small or are related to acculturation rather than to the genetics of your sex. Now, meta-analysis do show that females seem to have slightly lower scores on self-esteem scales than do males. So if you give the 10-item Rosenberg self-esteem scale to a group of males and to a group of females, what you're going to find is that the male's self-esteem score is a little bit higher than the female score on general. Now, the old beliefs that I grew up with in grad school was that self-esteem plummeted. Actually, what you're going to see in self-esteem is that our self-esteem is highest when we're 8, 9 years of age, 10 years of age. And then for most of us, puberty is going to bring out a drop in our self-esteem as we start growing up and we compare ourselves to other people and we learn what disappointment is and what it's like to be embarrassed or to feel inferior. Across the lifespan, measures of self-esteem across the lifespan show that your self-esteem is the highest at 8 or 9 years of age. and then it drops precipitously during your teenage years, and then slowly throughout your adulthood, your self-esteem will begin to climb, but it never reaches the self-esteem level that you have as an 8-year-old kid, because life is tough, right? And we all meet failure, and it makes you feel bad about yourself as you move into teenage years and adulthood. It used to be believed, in fact, that data always that was presented to me suggested that female self-esteem dropped more radically than male self-esteem did. And the belief was that female self-esteem would not match male self-esteem. Now, what you're going to see is that females do experience lower levels of self-esteem, but the drop in self-esteem is not as extreme for females as it used to be. But self-esteem is related to how people respond to you, your comparison, your success, what you have compared to other people. And so when we move into our adolescent years, we begin to compare ourselves to other people, and that really causes self-esteem to take a hit. Now, men tend to have a little more positive self-esteem than do females, but it's not a huge difference. Now, aggression. Are males more aggressive than females? Maybe, but not really. Okay, now it depends on how you look at aggression. There are two ways to be aggressive. One way is that I can use my knuckles and my fist, and I can push you around and I can beat you up. We'll call that physical aggression. Okay, so males are going to be more likely to engage in physical and verbal aggression. We're going to yell at each other and we're going to punch each other. So males are more likely to engage in physical or verbal aggression. And the aggression that boys are more likely to engage in is that kind of aggression that's more associated with violent activity. So if you look at the rates for violent activities, rape, robbery, murder, assault, in all violent crimes, you're going to see that 95% of all of these violent crimes are committed by males as opposed to females. Males are much more aggressive when it comes to physical forms of aggression. Take a look at the chart below to see that. On the other hand, females are aggressive, but they're going to use their aggressive instincts different ways. Females are more likely to use what we'll call relational aggression. So their aggression is going to take more of the form of cutting people out of social groups, or not talking to people, giving them the silent treatment, or in a sense, treating them in ways that hurt their feelings about themselves. So females are more likely to use this relational aggression or indirect aggression, which you might think of as being passive aggressive, right? Talking about you but not directly to you, causing trouble for you without actually being a part of that trouble. So while your males are going to be more likely to use physical aggression and verbal aggression, and this chart down here shows you that it is physical aggression is primarily a male behavior, what you're going to see is that your females know how to be aggressive too. They just do it in sort of a relational sense by ruining relationships that people have with other people. So we've got sort of this difference in aggressive behavior. Okay, now a meta-analysis has shown that males are more likely, slightly more likely to engage in sexual activity. We're more likely to have sexual partners, and we're more likely to have permissive attitudes about sex. We're more likely to engage in casual sex, use more pornography, and masturbate more often. Now, these differences are small, and a lot of people believe that these differences in the expression of sexuality and sexual behavior is cultural rather than necessarily biological. And we argue that women are socialized to feel more guilt and shame in response to sexual feelings and sexual behaviors. So, part of the male stereotype is being hypersexual. And so, males are rewarded, in male sexuality is reinforced more for males than for females. So, female sexuality is not reinforced, it may be punished. Women and men experience emotions. Well, males both feel anger, both feel these emotions equally. However, males are not to express emotion. Male stereotype. Being and emotions in our men. If you've ever been in a relationship, a heterosexual relationship, what you're going to find is that females a lot of times complain that their male partners not able to read and respond to their nonverbal emotions as well as females would like them to. The sound is not good. Okay, how is the sound now? Did the sound get any better? What is the problem? How is the sound? Can you hear the sound any better? Okay, it's any better? Okay. All right, so obviously I don't have enough bandwidth to stream my visual image and do the lecture. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my. It's working now? Okay, cool. Yeah, I had this problem yesterday. Apparently, if I'm not plugged in, if I'm not getting at least 100 megabytes of download, I'm having trouble with my dadgummit. I'm having trouble with my streaming. If I'm under 100 megabytes, I obviously can't stream my video and my PowerPoint at the same time. I'm sorry. Okay, so women are better likely to recognize nonverbal cues and emotions and other facial expressions. Now, communication. Some people say men don't talk. Men, it's always the female that's talking, etc., etc. You know what? Men talk, and we actually talk more and interrupt more than do women. Have you ever heard that term mansplaining? A lot of my female friends like to use that because it seems like us guys tend to cut in on the conversation and tell everybody what we know more often than women do, right? And females tend to be more willing to listen to the male in the room. However, when women have more power at work or in relationships, they do interrupt more. And you know what your book suggests is who interrupts may depend upon status. And unfortunately, because of this male-centric world that we live in, your males are a lot of times going to have more status in social and work groups, and they're going to use this status and talk more than do females. Is this a biological difference? No, it's probably related to the way our society is culturally organized, with males having more power than females. Okay, so sexual behaviors. Maybe men are a little more sexual, but it's probably related to culture. Females and males both experience emotions, but it's probably culturally more appropriate for females to demonstrate emotion. Males, there aren't really that big a difference in communication patterns, although cultural differences seem to suggest that males are given the opportunity to talk more in mixed groups. So these are some of the gender comparisons that you'll see. But I think these gender comparisons are more related to culture than they are related to biology. Now, with regard to psych disorders, you're going to see a very interesting difference in the pattern of how psych disorders are experienced. Now, you can break psychological disorders up into a two-box category, whether or not these disorders are externalizing or internalizing. So if you think about all the different psychological disorders you could have, some of these disorders are demonstrated by people acting out, being aggressive, stealing things, pushing people around, engaging in hypersexual behavior, etc., etc., etc. Schizophrenia is an externalizing disorder where a person has delusions and hallucinations and crazy behavior that they demonstrate for everybody. Okay, and other disorders are what we call internalizing disorders. They're disorders where most of your abnormal experience occurs in between your ears. You're thinking too much. Maybe you're depressed and you think bad thoughts all day long. Maybe you're anxious and you're thinking nervous thoughts all day long. These disorders are disorders that occur that people don't necessarily see, but disorders that occur inside your mind. We'll call these internalizing disorders. And what you're going to see with regard to these disorders is that men are more likely to have externalizing disorders. So you're going to see more men alcoholics, more men with substance abuse disorders, and more men with schizophrenia. These are behaviors where a person acts out more, and males are more likely to demonstrate externalizing disorders. On the other hand, women are more likely to suffer internalizing disorders, such as depression, anxiety, and body image problems that lead to unhealthy eating behaviors. Okay? Now, so men are more likely to act out, and females are more likely to have sort of these internal neurotic disorders. Okay? And then one final comparison is brain organization. Let's actually go to the brain and see if there are brain differences between males and females that might explain all of these differences that we see between males and females. So let's take a minute and talk about this. So the cerebral hemisphere, if you look over on the right side of your picture, you'll see a cerebral cortex. You're looking at it from above, you're looking down on this person's brain, and what you'll notice is that there is this split going down the length of the brain from top to bottom, which appears to divide this brain into a left half and a right half. This is the typical organization of the cerebral cortex. You have a left half of your cerebral cortex, and you have a right half of your cerebral cortex. Now you'll notice that this brain is really wrinkly. The reason that brains have wrinkles is it increases the surface area on the outside of the brain. It's the outside of your brain, the covering, what we call the gray matter, which is where all of your intellectual and functional abilities are controlled. The inside of the brain is called the white matter, and that represents all the connections between these different areas on your brain. Okay? Now, if you look at your typical cerebral cortex, what you're going to notice is that the left half of your brain, the left half of your cerebral cortex is more important for verbal abilities. So the left half of your brain is sort of the linguistic part of your brain, and the right half of your brain is the nonverbal part of your brain. It's where you perceive emotions and facial experiences. Let's put it this way. If I was to tell you a joke, the left half of your brain would get the words and the logic and the grammar and be able to interpret my joke. The right side of your brain would be the part of your brain that laughs at it, that sees the humor in the joke. And so the left side is for language, and the right side is for nonverbal communication. Okay? Uh-oh. So, now what we typically talk about is this idea of cerebral specialization. Is an ability controlled by one part of your brain, or is it controlled by multiple parts of your brain? Okay. Now it turns out that males have more cerebral specialization than females. What that means is that the activities that boys engage in, that males engage in, are going to be controlled by fewer parts of their brain than are females. So whereas specifically when it comes to language, what you're going to find is that females use more of their right and left hemisphere for language than do males. Your males' language abilities are going to be more localized in the left hemisphere, whereas when you look at an fMRI or a PET scan or an MRI of a female engaged in a linguistic task, what you're going to see is that the female is using more parts of her brain for communication than the male is. This is because males have more cerebral specialization than females. Okay? Now, and these occur from brain scans which show you how male and female brains are active when males and females are engaged in activities. Now, if you look at the actual structure of the brain, what you're going to notice is that females appear to have a larger corpus callosum, which is the part of the brain that connects the left part of the cerebral cortex with the right part of the cerebral cortex. And this makes perfect sense if you think about it. If a female is going to use more parts of her brain while she's engaging in a typical task, she's going to have a bigger part of her brain that connects the left and right half of the brain together. So we think this might be a reason why females show less cerebral specialization than do males. Now, why are these differences? I will throw out an evolutionary explanation that I absolutely cannot prove right now. But evolutionary psychologists suggest that survival pressures place different pressure on male brains and female brains and cause these brains to evolve to have different strengths and weaknesses. And so what they suggest is that space in the right part of your brain that females use for language is what males use to give themselves better spatial orientation abilities. Now, why? Maybe a million years ago, it was more important that males hunt and females take care of the babies. Now, that doesn't happen now. We live in a more egalitarian society where the pressures suggest that a male and female can hunt dollar bills just as easily as one another, right? And that males can take care of babies just like females can take care of babies. But 2 million years ago, as we evolved, we had these roles of the male and female of the species. The female took care of the offspring while the male went out and hunted. And the idea was the male's brain evolved where that right part of the brain was used more for spatial orientation activities that would help in hunting and tracking of food. On the other hand, females, since they didn't have the environmental pressure of hunting, that area of the brain evolved to help in language and relationship maintenance abilities. And so what this would suggest is that male and female brains are different because of evolutionary pressures. Now, here's the deal. This research that we find showing sex differences between males and females is small, And these findings are inconsistent. You don't always find these differences when you conduct a research study. And that's why we have the meta-analysis to show us over the course of 100 studies how often does this finding pop up. That's why we use meta-analysis. And what you're going to find is that gender differences, sex differences, are inconsistent. You don't always see them when you look at them. And more importantly, brains change as we are socialized. And as we've talked about over the course of this semester, males and females are socialized differently. They are trained differently. And so these differences that we see in adult populations may not represent evolutionary or biological findings, but they may represent cultural socialization pressures. Okay, and overall, I'm going to tell you that male and female brains are far more similar than they are different. Okay, now let's go ahead and put all of this in perspective. If you look at these charts right here that I'm showing you for males and females, let's say when you look at IQ scores, what you're going to see maybe is that your females score just a tad higher than do males on average. Your males are going to show better mathematical abilities than do females on averages. But really, when you look at these distributions for any findings, what you're going to see is that these distributions overlap for the most part. Yes, we do see an average difference between males and females on a given trait, represented by these dotted lines right here. But overall, the distributions show a lot more similarity than they do differences, okay? So gender differences are quite small and similarities typically outweigh the differences. And gender accounts for a small proportion of the differences between individuals. In fact, really, the biggest difference that you're going to see between males and females, the most consistent finding you're going to find, is that males do tend to do better at these mental rotation tasks than are females. That's the one biggest cognitive finding difference that you're going to find between males and females. We're better able in rotating those objects in our mind. Now, these differences may seem larger because of social role theory. These differences become exaggerated in our culture. Your female may keep saying, "Oh, I'm not good at math. Oh, I'm not good at math." That's because she's been trained to say that. And so this belief will take on a life of its own and cause that female to become less good at math. But is that really biology, or is that effect of culture? Okay, and so we, in a sense, construct our own realities that may cause these gender differences that we think are biological but are really social to begin to emerge. Okay, and what I'm going to preach to you today is the gender similarities hypothesis. Yeah, we look different on some of these things, and you'll occasionally notice difference between your male and female friends, but really our brains are organized in such a way that we are far more similar than we are different. And your book's even going to suggest that these exaggerated perceptions of differences make us less effective at work. If you're unwilling to let a colleague work because do something because they're male or female, and you think males or females can't do that right, you may be decreasing the efficiency of your workplace. If you are a male who thinks that it's important that males not demonstrate emotion, it's going to be destructive to your personal relationship. So, the whole point of today's lecture was that I wanted you to know that psychologists are interested in seeing if male brains and female brains are different, and if these brains cause differences in how we act and function. And what I want you to know is that it looks like females maybe use less specialization. They use more parts of their brain to engage in a specific activity than males, or cerebral specialization. The connections between the left half and the female brain may be a realistic biological difference between male and female brains. But when it comes to language, cognition, personality, and behavior, females and males are a lot more similar than you would think biologically. And when they do demonstrate differences, we think a lot of times this might occur because of culture as opposed to any real biological differences. Okay, that's really all I wanted to say today. I just wanted to talk about a little bit about the differences between males and females. We're going to meet tonight in webinar at 8 p.m. We have our weekly webinar, and tonight we're going to talk about gender socialization. How do we learn how to be males and females? And I've got some really interesting video clips that I'm going to show you that demonstrate how we socialize children to be boys or females. And then we're going to ask the question I want to discuss with you: should we try to bring males and females up without teaching them these ideas of gender roles? Thank you very much, folks. Y'all have a great day. It was really good to see you. I hope you come to webinar tonight at 8 p.m. so I can see you. Take care and have a great day.